Welcome back to On-Chain Revolution. My name is Yago B, and I am your host of this channel and show. What a day to be alive. Bitcoin is showing that extreme volatility that I was telling you guys about yesterday, right? I said it was going to happen. It never fails. The FOMC is, probably has a good amount to do with the volatility. I mean, a majority of it. PPI definitely didn't help, came in hot today. But also, I think things are starting to spiral again out in the Iran conflict. We're going to get into all that and more because there's other updates that are huge that have happened in terms of infrastructure. And I know infrastructure is boring. I get it. Stablecoin this, Clarity Act that, all these things. But there's some bullish movements that happened in the past couple of days with the SEC and CFTC. We're going to get into that and exactly what it means. I saw a comment in the chat about how we got clarity from the SEC before the Clarity Act actually came. And I actually think that was the way that we needed it. Obviously it's annoying that they keep pushing this out with Congress, but the SEC has a lot of power. And for them to do this is really bullish for the overall space. We'll get into that and the details and what it means, because it definitely helps builders and investors all around. It helps the space. We'll dive deep into that. Don't forget, at the 30-minute mark, we'll have the amazing team from Big Noodle. We'll have Dr. Mien and Superfan, and we're going to talk AI privacy. Should be a fun one. Get your questions and comments in the chat ready for that segment. That team and those guys are really knowledgeable in AI, so it's your opportunity to learn as much as possible, right? But I want to welcome back everybody, the TikTok audience, the Abstract audience, Zora, Rumble, Twitch, YouTube, and X, of course. YouTube and X. On the YouTube side, smash that like for me. It helps me a ton. It really does, guys. I don't just say that just to say it. It really does help. And subscribe to the channel if you like my style and my content. On the X side, I need you guys to help me share this stream link, trying to build that brand back up on the X side, and all of that helps a ton as well. But before we get into the market update, we're going to stick to what we've been doing, and that is getting Iran conflict update. But I do see a couple comments here in the chat. Let me get to these really quick to give you guys a shout out. One Arm Bandit says, we got clarity before the Clarity Act. Yeah, I'm really excited about it. I'm going to dive deep into that, and hopefully you guys learn from what we go over. It's really exciting stuff. Superfan says, GM, OCR fam, GM Superfan. And then Stan says, do the listed Clarity Act projects add to long-term holding, including Doge and Sheeb? So we'll get into that as well. I mean, a lot of exciting stuff from that. Appreciate the comments. Keep the comments and questions coming. Like I said, especially for that midway through segment with the AI topic where we talk AI privacy. All right, so let's get an Iran conflict update. We're going to see what is happening. Why is oil spiking again? I've been using CBS News because I feel like they're a pretty good source, I guess. I mean, out of all the U.S. media companies that we can choose from, right? But the live update is titled, Iran launches deadly missile attacks on Israel Gulf states as war spirals. So we've known that is kind of what's happening the past couple of days. Goes in a little deeper, says what to know as the Iran war escalates. Iran launched waves of missiles and drones at Israel and Persian Gulf states Wednesday, lashing out as Israel said it killed another top official. Iran's intelligence minister, Esmail Kadhib, after killing top security chief Ali Larijani. 2 people were killed near Tel Aviv by falling debris, Israel first responders said. So, I mean, it seems like it's getting more and more intense, right? The U.S. and Israel seem to be a lot more strategic in who they're going after. And of course, the other side, I'm just saying in general, because they don't really have, their leaders and all that stuff, they're probably going to just be going after where it really hurts the opposition, right? And that is the surrounding Gulf states, because they're going to be upset. And that's the allies, right? Those are the friends of the U.S. and Israel, right? So that's where they can kind of get back at the U.S. and Israel, and that's what they're doing, right? And honestly, it seems to be kind of working a bit. At least we're seeing oil kind of shoot up here and today, but it's been back and forth, right? It goes on to say the price of international benchmark Brent crude oil was struck over $100 per barrel in early trading Wednesday morning, up more than 40% since the war started, right? And it just goes on a little bit more about the top official they went after and all that stuff. So, really seems like this is starting to continue, or it's continuing with the intensity, and hopefully, it does taper off a bit. But as of right now, it doesn't seem like it's turning around, right? So that is the update for the Iran war. Let's get into some key economic events that happened this morning outside of the FOMC meeting. The FOMC meeting is really important. We knew that they were just going to make the decision to keep the pause going. That no surprise there, right? But it's more about what Powell says at the 2 p.m. Eastern time, 1 p.m. Central meeting, press conference, right? That is where I think things can get really volatile. But let's take a look right now at what happened today, and that is the PPI came in, and it came in hot, guys. Not good. U.S. February producer prices are higher than expected. PPI came in 0.7% month over month versus a 0.3% forecast. That is pretty bad. You overshot more than 100% of what the forecast was, right? And then PPI year over year came in at 3.4% versus the forecast of 2.9%. So why does this matter, versus CPI? Well, PPI is kind of like that manufacturing wholesale flow. So that's the first level of where things, you start to notice things in terms of inflation. If it's more expensive for that level, then it's going to get passed down to the consumer, right? But Bitcoin has shown pretty good resilience with inflation. So we'll see if it continues on. The core PPI came in positive 0.5% month over month versus a positive 0.3% forecasted there. So not good news with the PPI data there. But let's see how the market is responding to all this information that's coming out and what people are thinking potentially, how the Fed is going to, how Jerome Powell is going to speak later today. So the stock market is pulling back a little bit of red today, 0.4%, 0.41% pulling back for the S&P 500. You got the NASDAQ pulling back 0.32%. The Dow Jones pulling back 0.67%. The VIX is in the green. When it's in the green, it's not really a good sign, right? Volatility to the downside. The DXY has bumped up 0.16%. So a flip-flop from the past couple of days, basically. The Russell 2000 pulling back 0.5%. That Mag 7 pulling back 0.36%. NVIDIA pushing up 0.58%. And then you got Google pulling back 0.08%. So not really, the Mag 7 looks pretty decent, like, one green and then the rest really just barely in the red and flipping barely in the red or barely in the green right here, right? You see Apple barely, they're probably the biggest one pulled back at 0.59%. You got Tesla even and Netflix even there. And then crypto, Bitcoin taking a little bit of a gut punch, right? Pulling back 3.44%. You got Ethereum pulling back 5.32%. And then the precious metals, gold pulling back 2.57%, and silver pulling back 2.88%. So silver finally broke under that $80 mark that it's been hovering around. It's sitting at $76 right now. And gold is broken down below $5,000 again. It was holding 5,000 pretty good, but you're seeing oil jump up almost 3% here, right? And if we look at the oil price per barrel, it's back right at that $100 mark. It's at $98.55, right? So it's heading back to kind of that territory to where oil is getting aggressive to the upside. And what happens to the assets when that happens? They pull back, right? And that is what we are experiencing right now. All right, so let's get into kind of what the main topic is, right, for today. And is Bitcoin gonna dump today, or is it gonna pump? Is it gonna explode to the upside? Obviously, we're not a crystal ball. We don't know exactly what's gonna happen. It's gonna depend a bit on how Powell speaks, if he's hawkish or dovish, right? But what are we gonna be looking at? We're gonna be looking at, in my opinion, the daily chart. That is a very, very important chart because volatility throughout the day honestly doesn't matter that much, right? It can create fear for people throughout the day, but if the institutions want this bullish momentum to continue, they'll make sure that on the daily time frame that the candle finishes above that previous resistance level, and that's 73,000, right? That's this green line that I'm looking at right here on this daily chart for Bitcoin. And I said we needed to finish a line, a candle above this previous resistance level to actually have a conversation about, okay, will there be a continual uptrend for Bitcoin? Unfortunately, it was at the beginning of this week heading into an FOMC meeting on today, right? But it did finish above the $73,000 mark, and it actually had a continuation candle above it yesterday, Tuesday. Finished right at 73.79. So what needs to happen now? We need to get this bought back up by the end of today. Now, that doesn't mean that there's no chance for an uptrend continuation to happen if it doesn't, but it will make me feel a lot more confident that, okay, we got through the FOMC uncertainty, and Bitcoin looks like it's going to continue with this uptrend, right, to finish the week. Sunday is going to be very, very important, but the daily chart leads us there, right? So right now we're getting, hit pretty bad, sitting at 71,150, right? The second half of the day has to be a rebound, in my opinion. Again, that doesn't mean that we can't have a continuation towards, have that uptrend bounce back into the weekly close on Sunday, but it's going to be harder, right? So that's what I'm looking at for today. Hopefully we can finish today back above that $73,000 mark, and that will kind of push the continuation into tomorrow. If we don't, tomorrow is the biggest day of the week heading into Friday, getting back above that $73,000 mark. So that is kind of where I am at mentally in terms of, does this have that continuation to the upside, or does it pull back? And some other things to continually look at is the ETF inflows, right? Does that continue? Today's going to be important. How does March 18th fare for the ETF flows? Do we get a report early tomorrow morning that today's flows was positive for Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana? Because that has been a really good leading indicator to let us know, hey, things are remaining bullish. And it does seem like the institutions want this bullish trend, right? We came out of extreme fear. We got to 28 yesterday, which we were at 8 3 weeks ago, right? So things seem like they want to go to the upside, but the fundamental analysis with the war and FOMC, it's given us a little bit of that friction to continue on forward, right? But we'll see what happens here. That's kind of where I'm at. So daily time frame, Bitcoin needs to finish above the previous resistance, continue that, and then also ETF flows. Pay attention to that. All right, we got a couple comments in the chat here. Stan says, has oil been tokenized? Yes, I believe it is tokenized. Yep, it is tokenized in perps, and you can take leverage on Hyperliquid. I'm not sure. I'm sure there is an RWA platform that has done it. It's not super popular to where everybody knows about it yet, but you can trade oil in the perps environment on Hyperliquid. Hopefully that answers your question there. And then Almond Joy says, at this point, it should be. I'm not sure what you mean by it should be. I caught the end of that comment, I think. But yeah, so keep those questions and comments coming in, guys. And remember, at the 10:30 Central mark, we got the Big Noodle team coming in here. All right, let's get into some headlines before we bring them up. Let's talk about inflows, right? We just talked about this is something very important to pay attention to. So the ETF flows for March 17th that finished yesterday. We had Bitcoin with inflow of 199.37 million. We have Ethereum at 138.2 million and Solana at 17.81 million. And XRP decided to join the party. They had an inflow of 4.64 million, right? So across the board, four of a kind, we had inflows for all of these major four assets, blue chip assets that we have been tracking, right? Now, if you remember the past 2 to 3 weeks, XRP hasn't been joining the party with the net inflows. It's been net outflow majority, right? On the daily outflow tracking and the weekly, actually. So I was trying to figure out what is happening. Why is XRP kind of being singled out here? And I came to the conclusion that it's because the institutions are waiting for clarity, right? In terms of saying, hey, this asset specifically is now a commodity, right? And so they're putting their capital and liquidity towards the ones that already have that clarity, right? Bitcoin and Ethereum. And now we have Solana that was announced 2 days ago, I believe, that no, they came out and said that Solana is a commodity, right? It's a commodity. And institutions do get tipped off a bit. So you're like, okay, well, they just became a commodity 2 days ago. Why were they pouring into them? Because institutions get tipped off a bit, right? They get the early information. And that is why I believe XRP has kind of been pulling back in the ETF flow tracking. But as soon as they get that green light, I think it starts to reverse, right? So for you XRP army people, I definitely think it's, maybe it's already starting because maybe, with the SEC clarity from yesterday, people are anticipating now that they'll make a statement about XRP being a commodity and not a security. All right. So let's get into this next topic, which is big, huge. Okay. So this was the big news yesterday. And what One Arm Bandit was talking about in the comments. It says the CFTC and SEC have jointly issued a new guidance clarifying how U.S. securities and commodities laws apply to crypto assets, introducing a clearer token taxonomy, right? This is something that we've been waiting for forever, right? And so we got it from the SEC. I feel like they could have done this. Both of these entities, regulatory entities, they could have done this a while ago, but maybe they were getting a little bit of pressure from the administration saying, hey, Congress is, taking their time with the Clarity Act. Let's, make some statements. Let's put something out there for clarity for the builders in the industry. And they sure did. That is for sure. So what does this mean? This put all digital assets into 5 specific categories. Okay. You got digital commodities. You have digital collectibles, which are like NFTs, ordinals, right? Digital commodities, those blue chips, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, maybe XRP soon. Digital tools. And you're like, what are digital tools, right? Digital tools are tokens that have utilities, right? Governance. They fall into that category. And then you have stable coins, which is self-explanatory there. And then, of course, the one that everybody fears, which is digital securities, right? And how do you determine if you're not in that digital securities bucket? Well, you have to make sure that your protocol is decentralized in the proper way, right? So the founder of the protocol has to kind of set it up and step away. And then there's some other details that we'll get into in the next headline that's relating to this as well. So the one thing I will say, though, is out of these 5 different categories, the U.S. really only focuses on 2 of them, but the SEC only focuses on the securities category, right? So obviously CFTC focuses on the commodity side, but that means that like the utilities or the tools and those categories, very, very bullish for the overall space, right? That we're getting this type of clarity from the 2 most, I would say the SEC is probably the most powerful regulatory entity in the financial sectors. So this is really bullish for our space here. All right. And then the next headline, like I said, ties pretty much directly into this, right? And it is that the chair, SEC chair, Paul Atkins, unveils regulation crypto assets, a token safe haven proposal for with 3 paths for crypto builders. This is different than what we just talked about. This is more of giving these teams that want to build in crypto a clear pathway to feel safe, right? Of that they're not going to get attacked because they're doing things the right way, right? So there's 3 pathways that allow them to feel comfortable to continually build in our space. And those 3 pathways are sales of the token, right? Airdrops and network rewards, right? So the sales are pretty obvious, right? ICO type situation like that. You know what you're getting into with that. The airdrops, right? That can be a part of, give backs, kickbacks, stuff like that, right? And then the network rewards is more for like, a claim type situation for users that help test out the protocol, those type of ways, right? But the one thing that, and this carries over from the previous headline, is for the protocol founder to really get their, out of the security bucket, they have to set it up to where they're stepping away and the protocol is decentralized at that point. So they do want to make sure that that is very, very clear there. So really bullish information coming out from the SEC and CFTC, right? And so this is something that our space has been waiting on for quite some time. All right. So let's get into the price action here before we get into our AI segment, which I'm really excited about because NVIDIA has been kind of coming out recently and talking about, how privacy is not really being, prioritized with these LLM models and agents and stuff. But we'll let the team dive into that. But let's get a quick look-see at where Bitcoin is potentially heading for the rest of today. Bitcoin, Ethereum, and the crypto bubbles, right? So I'm going to pull up the hour chart like I always do, and hopefully you guys can get some insight with me on where Bitcoin wants to go today, even though it's going to be super crazy and probably won't matter because, in 3 hours, we hear Chair Paul talking and we'll see what happens then. But if you are going to be looking at these indicators, the MACD is definitely stretched out to the sell pressure, wants to have this continuation to the downside. For me, this could be a bullish situation though. These institutional trading firms could be anticipating that Chair Paul's not going to be super hawkish and a strong rebound to the second half of today. But as of right now, definitely the MACD looks like, the sell pressure session got stronger every hour for the past 3-4 hours here. The stochastics also down in oversold territory as well. Wants to come up, but it's down here. We're looking at 1.3 on the stochastic RSI point scale there. So deep into oversold territory. And then you can see the candle is just barely getting green here, but that's after 1, 2, 3, 4 red candles for Bitcoin. So, what goes down must come up type of mentality potentially at some point, right? So yeah, we definitely need to get closer to that meeting to see if we get pulled out of this. As of right now, I imagine that it's going to stay in the sell pressure session here. So that's what I see for the 1 hour here. The 4 hour for Bitcoin, continuation to the sell pressure, very similar situation. This, in my opinion, is all going to change later today because it's FOMC day, right? It's volatile. The daily looks like it's starting to crack a little bit here. This extension for the buy pressure session for Bitcoin on the daily chart been going on since mid-February, right? So just a little bit of cracks here for the buy pressure session. Again, let's check this at 4 or 5 p.m. and see what is happening then. So this is just more of, the short term, I guess, if you're crazy and you're trying to trade this right before the meeting. This is kind of what is showing for Bitcoin and Ethereum. ETH 1 hour extension to the sell pressure, very similar situation as Bitcoin. 4 hour continuation to the downside, and then the daily for ETH, very similar situation, extension on the buy pressure, but a little bit of cracks right now. I imagine this is going to be looking very, very different later here in the next about 5 or 6 hours. All right, so let's take a look here at the crypto bubbles. top 100, everything is red except for Siren to the upside, plus 18%. River up 11%. Mien Core up 7%. Pretty much everything else is getting dumped. You got Aster pulling back 8.4%, MNT pulling back 10%, Trump Coin pulling back 7%. So pretty much on average about 4 to 9% pulling back in the top 100. Aster, we do have a story on them later. We'll get into after the AI segment here. And then the top 200, same situation, about 90 to 95% pulling back. Lombard has a big token unlock, or had one. So that's probably why that is pulled back 25%. And so there you go with that, right? But top 100 to 200, about 3 to 7, 8% pulling back here. So that is what we got for Bitcoin, Ethereum, and the alt market. I got one more headline here I want to hit on before we bring the team up. And let me pull this up here. Okay, so this is a bullish signal, guys. Binance saw 2.2 billion USDT coming into their exchange. So what does that mean? Right? That means that whales, institution, retail, they're all putting liquidity into the markets. 2.2 billion. You can see on this chart right here. This was yesterday. This is crazy, right? So the way that you can forecast where the market is heading, when there's a lot of noise that's coming from the fundamental analysis, like the war, oil, right? Those type of things, is what are the institutions doing and what are the whales doing? And it looks like with the ETF inflows, they're buying these blue chip assets, Bitcoin, Ethereum. Then you see something like what Binance is reporting, 2.2 billion of USDT stablecoin coming in. That's preparation to be able to buy up these assets as well, in my opinion. Could I be wrong? Sure, it could be diversion, but I can only do with the amount of data I get to be able to kind of put into this kind of forecasting approach. And that's what I'm doing. And I'm putting more into the bucket that these institutions want this bullish uptrend to continue on. So really, really bullish on seeing, metrics like this for the short term and midterm, but don't fall in love and feel like, okay, Bitcoin is going back up to its all-time high in the next month, because as these institutions are playing the game as well to be able to kind of sell after it goes up a bit, come back down until we officially come out of that bear market. Awesome. All right, guys. I'm going to bring up the team from Big Noodle, and we're going to talk AI privacy. Big Noodle is a Bitcoin AI company that focuses on DePIN and really just bringing AI to the space and also educating all you guys, right? The public on, AI Web3 and specifically Bitcoin and how that's going to look. But let me bring them up right now. I got Dr. Mien and Superfan. How are you guys doing?
Yo, Yago B.
What is going on?
I got to show you something. I brought something to show and tell today.
Awesome.
So let's see if this actually works. So I got a big shipment of these yesterday. These are basically our DePIN, and I've been doing a big build out to house these. And yeah, all the the camera's not picking it up.
You can kind of see it. It looks like, basically like a motherboard with solar panels on it.
Yeah, it's a funky board, because there's a RAM apocalypse happening right now. RAM is out of control with pricing. It kills the ROI on me being able to build a decentralized platform with the help of miners out there, right? So this board has all its memory soldered on. These were essentially PS5s. And the RAM is priced in already because the RAM was created on this board way before the RAM apocalypse. So this is my way of getting around what's just happening in RAM today and might continue on through 2028.
So is that like a strategy currently, or
Yeah.
PS5 like value shooting up right now?
Well, I had to find a way around the RAM prices because it basically killed killed my plan A, plan B, and plan C. Because we need as much RAM as we can get and as much high speed RAM as we can get. So what I found was these boards by Asus, which were originally meant for PS5s, have very high speed RAM for its GPU, and so yeah, this is going to be the basis of our DeepIn for a while.
Gotcha. That's awesome and super creative to kind of find that workaround. I'm pretty sure some people listening in are going to copy you guys. But Dr. Mien, how have you been?
Hey, Jacoby, how are you doing? So I'm great. So I'm very happy to talk about the AI privacy today because this is privacy and security is actually a big topic in Europe, and I'm being based in Europe, so this is a big topic, and we might be debating. I might be debating with Superfan because he's like representative to the US guys. So yeah, it'll be fun.
I'll win.
I'm excited to get into it. And Superfan, you had told me basically it really kind of sparked the idea whenever I was talking about the NVIDIA supercomputer and how they're taking this approach. I feel like it's definitely a business strategy for them, like leveraging, saying, hey, look, we can create a local LLM to where you can feel safe and that type of thing. But would love to hear what you guys got and dive into it.
Yeah, should we start with a little bit of news from yesterday's GTC from Jensen Huang?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. So Jensen took the stage as he always does. It's always a great show. And yesterday I was watching the keynote. It's like 2.5 hours, and I was reminiscing about when this used to be about video games and graphics, and now it's just not at all. It's about the future of the world and all societies. It's such a big leap from Crisis and Unreal, but yeah, there was a lot of high points, but the one I thought worth mentioning here today because of who our audience is NVIDIA's Nemo Claw. So they have a base model. It's open source called Nemotron, and it's and I haven't played with it yet, but I can't wait to. But what caught my attention, what came out of left field for me, was that they're really leaning into OpenClaw or their variation of it. So they're running it in sandboxes. They're running it in a way that could be considered secure, and NVIDIA and all the other big companies, of course, their bread and butter is serving AI to the consumers. But there's a huge market segment that is not a consumer. Those are hospitals, those are legal firms. There's a ton of sensitive data out there that cannot be shared, cannot be scraped. Personal info cannot make it to the large language models. So there's a ton of there's a ton of business types that are locked out of the AI revolution that's happening, and that's kind of what NVIDIA is looking to do. The DGX Spark is what you mentioned the other day, and that's what triggered this whole thing. That was built for devs to train on, but really what it's also going to do is let people do on-premises private AI with bigger models than you could do on a GPU, for example. And the Nemo Claw is their way of doing agentic stuff, but with your own private data in the server room, or what used to be a server room and became a closet. Now it's going to become a server room again.
I mean, that's really big. They're kind of pinpointing a sector in the economy that isn't benefiting from all this. I get that, but like even more than just the private information, wouldn't there be a concern about like drifting and reliability as well with that kind of data? Because it's really important to get it right with like hospitals and stuff.
Sure. Yeah. Well, Whichever agentic platform you use, you can lock it down. The reason I think OpenClaw became so famous is because of the YOLO factor. You could open it up and let it do anything, but you could go in the other direction with it and really lock it down and give it very specific tools use and guardrails. So it's really an orchestration engine, and the devs can do whatever they want with it. What's important about this is it's meant to run within an ecosystem, not out in the wild. It's meant to live on the NVIDIA A to Z ecosystem and be very controlled.
Gotcha. And Dr. Mien, like with NVIDIA being, initially more geared towards the hardware side of the AI industry, and kind of as of late, they have that developer program that they opened, and they have those LLM models that they're hosting. Do you feel like they're trying to make a power move here, like a kind of like Apple in the 2000s or like Google in the 2000s, to where they just want to conquer the AI space altogether?
I think definitely, and I've also heard of like mining AI in space, stuff like that. So this sounds a little bit futuristic, but I think it's not that futuristic in my opinion. So you have to solve some like cosmic ray problem in space and in vacuum, and also about also some hardware stuff like semiconductor. If they are in space, there might be some modification of that, but I think there is a lot of things happening, and NVIDIA is like leading this kind of power. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, they definitely are like have a prime position in the industry to really take over. But let's get into the privacy side of things. With privacy and AI, it's like this industry is so new, so it's kind of like we're learning, and they're putting like band-aids on regulations and all these things like that. But how do you guys want to kick this off? Because like there's definitely different political areas that are covering and trying to race to have their regulations and stuff. Maybe Dr. Mien, maybe you could start with how the EU is looking at it, and then Superfan, you can kind of take the other side.
For sure. I think Superfan will be like diving into a lot of details about how to build privacy and security regarding AI. But I have been looking into the EU AI Act recently. And also I've been talking to a lot of founders of AI and VCs here in Europe. So I'm based in Berlin right now. And so there is this EU AI Act, which passed like 2 years ago in summer, but it's like a phased rollout. So in this summer, like roughly August this year, they would like take everything into effect. So there are different. So basically, let me tell you briefly about what's inside. So basically, for the AI security and AI risk, there are different kinds of levels. The first one is the unacceptable risk and high risk, and also limited risk, and the rest. Okay, so what is called a unacceptable risk? I don't know if that works in the US, but let's say for example, if someone, so it's called like untargeted scraping of facial images from the internet or CCTV for recognition databases. For example, if there's a tech company who develops a recognition software that used automated process to scrape millions of user selfies, let's say from Instagram, from YouTube, or like they could scrape our face right now, right? And also from Facebook. And this is called unacceptable risk. And they massively use that for like third-party search and matching. And this is not acceptable. So this is already effective as of February last year. So also there is this like high risk AI systems, the second level, which is, for example, for like employment and HR applications. So for example, if you use AI for screening resumes and like evaluating performance or determining the promotions, this is like called high risk AI system, and this is not right. And there's another limited risk, which is called transparency obligations, which will possibly start like this year in summer, for example, like like AI generated content such as like videos, which would be introducing some kind of violence, but they are fake, and like the clients or the users should know that they are AI generated. You should mark that as AI generated, things like that. So different kinds of levels, and then also there are also other like compliances, but basically what EU Act is listing different levels of risk of AI uses, and then different kinds of laws against these kind of risks. So that is what the whole story. So Superfan should be talking about what's happening in the US. And also I can talk about how companies should conform to these kind of regulations later. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've gotten some insights from Benny. I talk to Benny sometimes from Tap Protocol from Track, and he's he's told me about what he's dealing with. There's a lot of opportunity there because privacy is taken so seriously that it almost comes at the cost of innovation or being able to do business in AI freely. So there's some opportunities around working within those guardrails, those confines. But one of the problems here is that Europe is going to lead in privacy, but it removes some of the freedoms. It removes the pace of innovation. I joke that for every year out here in AI land, like in San Francisco, Europe loses a century of innovation. Like they're so behind.
Are you saying that Europe is overregulated? No way.
So, and especially with AI, and well, wherever privacy is applied. So it's but it's not all rosy here either, in terms of freedom. And I don't know if I'm causing an echo. I'll give you sorry. I'm on headphones, but
I think you're okay.
Some echo. Okay, so like I did a little research, because privacy can be paired with freedoms, and then we look at our the US's democracy, and I found some really interesting numbers. Like in terms of privacy, USA is number 30 on the list of countries for freedoms, including this. We're way down the list. We're so monitored here, and at the consumer level, we're pretty okay with it. We're pretty okay with everything we've ever typed into a keyboard just being useful to the company. And then in terms of democracy, which I link to freedom a lot, USA is 28th in the world. And one of the examples I found that really apply here is it's illegal for us, and I think the laws keep changing with what's considered legal or illegal. But throughout the 90s, it was illegal to use anything above 256-bit encryption because the government can't break into that. And through the 90s, if you used above 256, that was actually, the penalty was a munitions charge. So it was like carrying a bomb to use strong encryption. That's what you got charged with. And to me, that's pretty crazy. So with AI moving so fast and, privacy kind of being on the wayside, I think this gets really important. But with Europe, that AI moves in tiny cycles, like 3-month to 12-month cycles, but government in general runs in 5 to 10-year cycles, and that's what's holding back, I think, innovation in Europe. Even though we got to shout out Google DeepMind for being in London, so they seem.
Yeah, I mean, it's no secret that the EU is very serious, I guess you could say, about their regulations and how they approach that. But it was really interesting to kind of see the standards that Dr. Mien said that they put out, and the unacceptable one. I know that's going to be very acceptable for Interpol, right? To be able to scan people's face and find out where they live. But I get it. Like, you don't want someone that is a hacker to be able to do that to anybody, right? So there's some levels to where it's like, okay, that's cool. But then like the other extreme parts, maybe not so much. But everything I actually heard is kind of reasonable. That she mentioned, not being able to scan people's faces with video cameras and all this stuff because you don't want, people to find out where you live just because you walk down the street with they're obsessed with you, they're a stalker or something. And the second one with the kind of promotional aspect of like companies and stuff, I can see that a little bit, but that's more like on the company, right? It's just high risk. It's not illegal necessary, right? Is that what they're saying?
Yeah. I mean, if you start doing encryption at strong encryption levels on AI, the regulation will follow. I think we move at a faster pace in AI. So at least in the States and in Asia, we get to experiment and break things. And in Europe, they're pacing themselves without that experimentation. So I think it'll always be clear in Europe where you stand as a business, but it might be unclear until regulation comes. And in crypto, we know how this feels.
It's the same thing. It's the exact same thing. If you look at, they just did it. They just were like, okay, well, we'll just like continue business as usual, par for the course until they give us a regulation like Coinbase, Gemini, everybody cracking. But in Europe and EU, you have companies like Bitpanda that like we're like, okay, we're following to a T everything you say. Also, they put things out, and that's the difference, like you said. But I'd like to get back to Dr. Mien about the company usage, because if I'm a company and I'm looking to promote, some employees in my company, like what's the best use case for this?
So I think for company, I feel like this looks really like testing robotics when they treat AI. So for example, there's, first of all, if you want to open up a company in Europe, there is this, first of all, about AI, right? So first of all, you have these AI regulatory sandboxes that reminds me of Big Noodle sandboxes. Anyway, so you have the AI regulatory sandboxes. Every country should have that at national level by August this year. So they will provide a controlled experimental and testing environment for innovative AI systems before they are placed on the market. And for example, and you have someone like to audit that sandboxes as well, the legal team. And another side is other than sandboxes, which is isolated from the real world, you can test some in real world conditions. So, for example, like so these, but just a little bit. So, so this will allow developers to gather robust data in actual operating environments to provide provided they submit a real-world testing plan and obtain informed consent from participants. So this sounds a little bit abstract, but so first of all, you have to test everything in the sandboxes, and there is some room for you to test in real-world conditions, but everything should be legal. Someone should be watching you do everything. Yeah. But one thing which is good, which is that if you are a very small company that just started, there's a lot of green line for that. Under all these conditions, for example, they will allow you to do these sandboxes and real-world testing first, because like the legal team, there is like limited human labor as well. But you are like having green light to be accessible to these teams as well. So that is basically if you want to do AI in a EU company.
And I'd love to add to that the gap between the European companies who have to go through these motions and US and Asia, China specifically, where we're building quickly, the reliance on things like the US and Chinese hyperscalers, for instance, that gap is just going to grow each year. The reliance on the models out of China and the infrastructure out of the US, that gap will keep widening, and that's why Europe, I think, they're putting themselves in a pickle. I get it, but it's also not good for them.
Yeah. And I think like companies that are going to be taking this approach on, with the EU side, they're going to have a lot more clarity initially, right? Like you kind of mentioned there. But it's going to be interesting to see how fast, these companies really go dive into it. And NVIDIA came out and basically made these statements saying, hey, if you do these things locally, do you think that helps for like companies to try to be more local, to keep their privacy to where they don't have, run into these issues?
Well, I think in some cases you have no choice, like with the legal and medical stuff. And this kind of answers one of Stan's questions. Great questions, by the way, Stan. Shout out to you. Track seems to be betting on local AI versus cloud, and that one really, I think, paints a picture of the opportunity he has in front of him, but also he doesn't have wiggle room. There's really no choice. If you want to experiment, if you want to break things, you've got to do it locally. And even if you open up your private cloud for your clients and stuff, that's probably the only way to get around regulatory.
Yeah, and we're gonna find out. But let's get into a couple other questions by Stan, because he's put a lot in here. Let's see where we want to start with this, because he's got quite a bit. Stan is the AI community member here. He says, is DeepSeek continuing their pursuit to become number one, or is that too lofty? Thanks. He mentions DeepSeek a lot. Do you guys are into these different LLMs. Do you guys feel like DeepSeek is like, the winning right now?
We actually have a direct relationship with DeepSeek, and when they had their viral moment, kind of disrupting the whole narrative around the value proposition from VCs into OpenAI and that kind of thing, tucking in the billions. That's when we got to know them pretty well, and they're full steam ahead. For a long time, when you looked at papers, AI academic papers, all the best stuff was coming out of Chinese universities. And so it had a direct effect on the foundational model builders in China too. And DeepSeek's at the top, in my opinion, and they keep working. They'll remain there. So I don't think that's a lofty statement at all. I love all the competition. They're competing with ByteDance and the other companies escape me right now. But those are big corporations with a lot of products. DeepSeek gets to focus on what they do well, and so I think that's why they'll always kind of keep up front.
So I always thought Anthropic was the leader, but maybe it's because I'm too much, in the Western media and seeing them. I mean, I've used Anthropic. I can't say I've used DeepSeek. What about you, Dr. Mien? Do you feel confident that DeepSeek is the strongest?
I personally barely use DeepSeek, like their app, but I do use Anthropic and GPT a lot. So all of my friend circles, they sort of switch to Anthropic, switch to cloud because of its skills, right? And they just like unsubscribe GPT and switch to cloud because, for example, like for some lawyers, especially, they have very strict workflow, and cloud skills would help them a lot. So in this sense, probably Anthropic is much more like applicable to your like daily life. Yeah.
And I want to make it. I want to distinguish between what's happening in open source and OpenAI and Anthropic too. In those use cases where you have to be on site, whether it's because of regulations in Germany or a medical company here, you can't use Anthropic or OpenAI. That's when you start looking for what you're going to host on premises, and that's where it starts to make sense to look at Qwen and look at DeepSeek, and host those and maybe fine tune them to your own needs.
So I've made some comments that seem pretty strong, I think, because I sound confident in it, and maybe I shouldn't be, but I was saying that like the local setups could kill kind of this API business model. I've gotten some pushback from that because they say there's no comparison in terms of capabilities. What are your opinions on that?
We're going to have both types of ecosystem. That's a guarantee. OpenAI and Anthropic are so ahead especially in certain sectors, like nobody beats Anthropic in coding, and I don't think they'll lose that lead to open source or closed source. But But we're going to have, there's room for both ecosystems, and there's a need for both ecosystems.
Gotcha.
APIs won't go away.
You're saying that, but do you think they get cheaper though? Because I mean, let's be honest. Like, you know, if you don't have like Codex OAuth, which is $200 a month, and so for some people that's way too much, but at least you're not getting nickel and dimes off of, you know, all of the inferences that you're using.
Yeah, we're going to see the economies around AI change also, and as we get into a robotic era in the next decade, because there's a situation of something's got to give at some point where Jensen talked about it yesterday. I say Jensen like we're on a first name basis.
Are you?
No, I wish. He talked about something that Dr. Mien and I have been talking about. A lot of it is her idea, actually, about the commoditization of AI tokens and how those start to be a backbone of their own token economy, not to be confused with crypto tokens. And he mentioned it on stage yesterday, talking about how, you know, tokens need to be abstracted. They need to be an infinite resource. And of course he would say that from the seat he sits in, right? From the stage he stands on. But it's true. There needs to be this this new age of eat all you want and it won't break the bank, or a new economy has to form around it at least. Because right now you invite people over for free, hoping they'll become an upper tier subscriber. And you know, there's got to be a different model in the future.
Yeah, I agree with that. Dr. Mien, this question I want to pose to you: how does America stack versus China in robotics?
American and China, I think they're quite similar in my opinion compared to like Europe, because both countries are very open. But there isn't much regulation currently. But I'm living in Europe, so I feel a lot of regulations. For example, talking about localization of AI large language models. Like I feel like this is not like something like advantage anymore. It's a must here. Because even if I don't care about my privacy, I don't care about my facial recognition thing, I must conform to the regulations here. Yeah. So every company should be having, like I've been talking to a lot of AI founders recently, and everybody was talking about regulation compliances here. And for example, I don't know if you heard of the word data poisoning, right? So, for example, if you put inappropriate or incorrect like facts to train the AI, so that will pollute the large language model, and this will happen a lot. And also within a company, you must use like local RMs, but that will cause a lot of latencies as well, because if you have somebody else to audit you in between, or if you automate the process, that will literally like cause some kind of latency. But to cater to the privacy like regulations, you have to do it. So I feel like, yeah, so everybody should be doing anything like local AI in Europe. Yeah.
Gotcha. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to add to that, because if we're talking about China versus American robotics, as Stan asked, China has one thing that they're so good at that we've lost the ability of, and that is supply chain. I think there's a reason we saw Cook next to Trump in the White House talking about the iPhone, and I think we were all expecting to say iPhones are going to be made in the US. And all he said is, well, we make the glass in upstate New York at Corning. You know, it's like you can't do it. You can't do it at the same cost. And so robotics is already far ahead of America in terms of building the actual bot. The supply chain is there already. They're experts at it. What we can do is maybe be the better AI that pairs with it, and build the better models, because we're in the business of business here, and a lot of money flows in America, which can fund being better at that maybe. But we don't have the supply chain that they do for building the robots. Shout out to Stan for that question.
Yeah. Good question there, Stan, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I could see that, you know, the manufacturing process. I mean, let's be honest, China owns that market. Like there's not a second place that comes close to it. Consumer market, the US owns that market. and there's not really a second place to that either. So it's a shame that you just can't have those two continually work together to make things more advanced. But I mean, it will. I think it will.
Yeah, I think there will actually be some blending. But the labor replacement, the bots in the factories and doing menial stuff, I think that'll come out of China without it just being copy paste of a human. It will have some basic AI, but maybe America will build the better AIs in the long run.
I feel like we're going to first probably see those in the Amazon warehouses. I mean, they already have like the almonds and stuff like that there. But all right, let's get to this last question here from Stan. He says, if AI becomes conscious, could the developer be charged with murder if he or she attempts to shut it down? So this is actually a really good question, because we don't think about like who takes responsibility. Because I mean, is the provenance from the creator? I would think so, but I'm curious. Let's kick it over to Dr. Mien first. Do you think that that's going to be a situation to where robotics becomes sentient, conscious, whatever you want to call it, with AI? Who's responsible for murders and stuff?
I think, first of all, this is possible. I always see AI as another kind of creature similar to aliens on the earth. So this will happen. Probably my limited belief as well, but this kind of thing wouldn't happen in Europe, because talking about murder, talking about who is responsible for shutting down AI, I think Europe has the advantage of tracing back to like what kind of data flows to where, and this is also like a must for every European companies that for example, it's very easy to, for example, if you wrote an article and then it's AI generated, you could say that this is AI generated. I'm not responsible for that. But in European countries, this is not the case. Like they will count to like whether or not you wrote that and where you are sending these articles to. And talking about the murder thing, so literally you have a workflow to trace back to who shut this AI down. So talking about who is responsible for AI, definitely you have that kind of system building up in Europe, but probably not in US or in China.
Gotcha.
I'll say this part quick because I know we're running out of time. The accountability isn't there for AI yet. AI is just seen as a hammer, as a tool, but it's coming. And with the conversation around AGI, personhood is also probably coming alongside that. Not too long ago, we had some open source developers go to jail because their software was used to do nefarious things. We've seen it in crypto too, when rugs were kind of tried to wrangle the developers too for enabling such a thing. So we're gonna bump our way through that conversation, but AI will have to be accountable, and personhood will be part of the discussion for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a natural evolution, I feel like. But also, I do feel like, those, I think you're referring to Tornado Cash, that type of, our space was being targeted at the time. So if AI becomes targeted, for sure, I think we see more of that happening here. Awesome. Appreciate the comments there and questions from Stan. I do have one headline. I'm curious about you guys. Maybe you guys can chime in here, but World teams, so WorldCoin, I'm guessing here, teams up with Coinbase to prove there is a real person behind every AI transaction. So this is X402 stuff that they're talking about, right?
Well, I haven't seen this, so I don't really know what they're trying to say here. I'm not sure what the statement means.
Yeah.
Have you seen this, Dr. Mien?
Yeah, I have no idea. Like, is it talking about a centralized exchange that is actually controlled by human?
So it's more of Sam Altman, which is the founder of OpenAI and World, right?
Yeah.
Teaming up with Coinbase to prove that there's actual real person behind the AI transaction. So the X402. So, because if there's like all these agents that are making rugging all these people and all this stuff or doing malicious things, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about, like who's held accountable here. Do you think this is needed, number one? And I mean, does it sound like it could be like the standard going forward to where, or is it more surveillance, you feel like?
You want to go for it?
Superfan, you first.
Okay. Yeah, neither of us want to take this. It's I think we're getting down to personal ethos with this one, right? Because I'm not 100% sure if they're advertising this as a good thing or trying to find a human in the mix who shouldn't be there. But X402, agents having wallets, agents being able to transact, this all starts to become proxy work for us, and it's just like it's been part of the crypto ethos always. If your agent messes up because you don't have a good control on your agent's wallet, that's on you, and it's you who funded it in the first place, presumably. I'm all for agents having full agency in this category, or having the option for it if you as the human want to give an agent full agency, meaning no person behind it. Again, I'm not sure I understand the statement at the bottom of the screen, but if they're talking about WorldCoin with their eye scanner and trying to say there should be a person behind everything, so this stuff doesn't go off the rails, I think we're holding the agents back if we don't give them autonomy, at least in some circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be situations if this evolves to where we think it is going to go, to where there's going to be people, maybe like large institutions get affected by it too. And in our space right now, I think that like a lot of changes that are being made are by these huge institutions, right? Whether privacy is being propped up a ton right now, not just AI privacy, obviously, cryptocurrency privacy, like, the private chains and all these things, because who doesn't want, people to see their transactions the most? Securities, these type of groups.
Yeah, right. And those guys will be there kind of scheming with their own motivations for better or worse, right? But I think the experiments will always happen in open source. And so we can rely on the open source community to run the experiments, run in ways that might be the better look at the end.
Yeah. And then money always comes in and decides it wants to take over and ruin the space. But that's just how it works, capitalism. But awesome.
We're out of time, but I'm wondering is it too late for me to take a minute to run through what I think is going to be really helpful to the folks listening about privacy? Okay, because I have a lot of notes, and I was going to talk about different price points and stuff. But I think the one thing I want people to leave with today is that there's a couple of ways you could be private if you're privacy focused, besides running something on your desk that doesn't call an API. And I'm looking at my notes right now. So everybody's heard of Monero, I expect. And that was like a big mixer. Crypto got mixed before it got finalized the transaction. And that's how you break the path, the breadcrumbs to find it. And it's possible to do prompt mixing in a similar way. Another one is to have, if you're setting up your own OpenClaw or something, to have multiple accounts on a site like OpenRouter, which gives you access to LLMs. This is not private because you're using an API, but if you're switching on and off between multiple accounts when you're doing prompting, that kind of obfuscates it. Obfuscation just means you're hiding in plain sight. And there's a couple of sites, like one that's been in the news recently is Venice, which is a privacy-focused AI chat. And at Big Noodle, we promise that everything is private. No judge can ask us for records if we don't keep any. So that's our take moving forward. And yeah, I just thought that should be like good closing statement for anybody who wants to be private. It's hard to today.
Yeah, definitely hard to. I'm curious in terms of the Big Noodle stuff, like where are you guys at with, the progress of, you have your TGE, all that stuff. And so that's where you guys are currently focused on, is the PS5 RAM.
Yeah, we've been building We've been building stuff for a long time. It meant getting on our own hardware layer to really pull the trigger on a bunch of stuff. And it starts with the super community, letting everybody chat with their ordinals, and then getting serious, going from there.
Yeah. I do think like the Bitcoin ecosystem needs something that people can use with AI, right? Like, I mean, you have like Base and all these other EVM chains and Solana's doing whatever the heck they're doing, but you know, making these claims, right? But I see charts to where X402 usage has been kind of going down the past couple of months. It was like really propping up towards the end of last year and the very beginning of this year. Then it's gone down. What's up with that? Like, is that something that's like hype gone down?
There was, but people are cooking for sure, 100%.
Gotcha.
So hype surge, and then there's a chart that shows the hype cycle. I guess Gartner's hype cycle, is that it? Yeah, the builders are building.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, you guys are definitely building. I appreciate you both for spending time with me and the audience here, and can't wait till next week.
Thanks, Yagabi. Thanks, panel. Or chat.
Thanks, panel. Stan. All right. We'll talk soon.
Later.
All right. Awesome segment. As always, those guys are really, really educated on the AI space. Look, I mean, they're builders. So you're hearing directly from the builders in the space. But I appreciate you guys hanging out for this hour and 12 minutes with me. Went over, pretty much covered everything that I wanted to cover today. Just remember that the main focus of Bitcoin and where it's heading, in my opinion, is let's see what happens around 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern after, that initial kind of brunt meeting and press conference, because it's going to be volatile until then, right? And then you can get your footing a bit as Bitcoin gets its footing and determine, hey, this looks like it's going to not have a good daily candle. And then we can kind of regroup in the morning. But I appreciate each and every one of you guys for supporting whatever platform you're on. I was messing earlier with the abstract stream because StreamYard, of course, messed up, and you guys were just staring at a post there. But I'll get that fixed for tomorrow. Appreciate all you guys and everything you do in terms of supporting the channel and show. And until tomorrow, peace.